Earlier this week, the world woke to the news of Stephen Fry, much-loved comedian, raconteur and general funny bugger, and also super smart guy, as he's engaged to his partner, Elliott Spencer. Now, what I noticed in the news this week was that some of the major publications in Australia that come out of Fairfax and news.com.au, you know, the way they've reported this disappointed me. So there's been inverted commas with the use of engaged and commentary around Stephen Fry engaged to younger lover. And because there is an age difference, but in most other circles, that's rarely reported on. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk to someone who's working in the business of reporting and freelancing. And I wanted to chat to Steve Dow, who's joining us on the phone now. He's a freelance writer for a range of publications. And Steve and I had some contact on Twitter, and we both sort of shared some frustration around the appropriateness of gay and lesbian reportage in Australia. Steve joins us on the line now. How you going?
Oh, good day, Serena. How are you travelling?
Oh, good, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Look, I had a bit of a reaction this week to the news of Stephen Fry getting engaged. I had a great reaction to that. That's wonderful. But what I really rallied against, Steve, was the way in which it was reported. What were your concerns about that?
Oh, look, I felt there was a bit of a double standard, and I'd probably pick on Fairfax a little bit because it's a news organisation that can and does do better. It usually covers same-sex marriage reasonably well, even if sporadically, but when it came to this quite well-known real-life person, same-sex couple, its standards fell dramatically, and it trivialised the news, and in turn, I think, trivialised same-sex marriage and freighted the story with a kind of a moral judgment. Putting the age difference in the headline was my main objection, and I had quite a robust conversation with one of the Fairfax editors about some of the thinking that went behind that, and it was quite illuminating to check.
Well, tell us about that conversation, because it sounds as though, in conversations you and I have had offline, that Fairfax thinks that Stephen Fry is a celebrity, therefore he is fair game. Would that be correct?
That was the language that was used, fair game. And fair game is interesting because that's the sort of terminology I would use for somebody who was a dodgy politician, for instance. You know, my rebuttal to this particular editor was, what about a fair go? You know, this is a good news story. This is still quite a remarkable story in an Australian context. And perhaps it's something to do with headline writers still trying to grasp the whole concept of same-sex marriage. But I think it also plays into online news values as against more sober print values, you know, this need for clickbait to really sensationalise something and in turn to sort of trivialise the whole idea. Perhaps I should spell out the age.com.au's headline was Stephen Fry, inverted commas, engaged to younger lover. And that was the headline that mainly annoyed me because it was there some 12 hours after Stephen Fry himself had confirmed the news on his Twitter account. And the Sydney Morning Herald homepage headline was Fry to marry 27-year-old. And later they appended Elliott Spencer to their story headline. But it still said he was 27, and the print version the next day, I don't think the Age bothered to put it in print, but the Sydney Morning Herald did. It said Stephen Fry to marry boyfriend, 27. So Elliott Spencer was reduced to being a number, essentially. So this robust conversation I had with the Fairfax editor, he said the inverted commas around engaged was a mistake, and indeed that was corrected, and that Fairfax are under pressure with reduced staff and so forth. But, you know, this was 12 hours or so after Fry had confirmed the news himself. And on the issue of the age difference, he said this was celebrity journalism. And I think to a lot of the readers, this is a lot more than celebrity journalism. I pointed out to them, I didn't see a headline like, you know, George Clooney to marry younger lover or George Clooney marries girlfriend 36. This editor pointed out that that's a 17-year age difference, not 30.
But, I mean, that's the bit that I don't understand, is that there's some inherent ageism within the commentary around Stephen Fry's engagement, which I think is to be celebrated because everybody deserves to be happy, and and he's previously been on the record as being a celibate man and having struggled with his mental health. Isn't it wonderful that he's found love? I think that's what we should celebrate. So there's the ageism, and there's that, as you say, there's that definite disconnect around what is appropriate editorial when discussing same-sex issues, because it's not an engaged with inverted commas. It's not about partners and lovers. It's that vernacular that mainstream press sometimes struggles with in describing our relationships, which are no different to heterosexual relationships.
Look, I should disclose I occasionally still write for Fairfax, and I still value what Fairfax does, but I now tend to write articles mostly for the Saturday paper and The Guardian, and The Guardian got the headline right, in my opinion. Very simply, it just said Stephen Fry to marry at Elliott Spencer. And also the choice of photograph was interesting. The Guardian's was much more flattering than the photograph that the Fairfax papers chose for their home pages. And Elliott Spencer is not quite so well known in an Australian context. I'm talking about the Guardian story that's come from a UK website. So perhaps the headline could have been Stephen Fry's surprise engagement, or Stephen Fry to marry comedian partner, as opposed to
younger lover.
Comedy. Yeah, a young lover or comedy partner, in which case we might think he was walking down the aisle with Hugh Laurie or something. But I think that the whole age and no one would claim a monopoly on oppression for gay people, but the whole age difference for gay people connects to this idea, this idea that gay people gay men in particular, are predators in a way. I mean, that was the idea beloved of old Hollywood films. You know, Hitchcock's Rope with the two guys who just murder and just for the sake of it, and or maybe, I don't know, Shirley MacLaine and Audrey Hepburn in The Children's Hour, the self-loathing wretch who suicides or what have you. That idea of the predatory gay is sort of, it's quite specific to this sort of situation, because it's been promulgated in even more recent decades by religious zealots. I remember when I was a teenager, my mother sticking a book on my bed. This is my sex education. It was called Everything a Teenage Boy Should Know, and I don't know what sort of flavour of Christianity published this book, but it had like a teenage boy on the cover. And the only thing it had to say about gay people was, be wary of homosexuals. They're always on the lookout for new recruits.
Yeah, recruiting into the cult.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder, I've spent the last few days wondering what was behind these Fairfax headlines, and I think it's populist values of online, this whole clickbait celebrity journalism versus the more sober and considered print values, and we're going to see more of this as print declines and digital kind of conquers the whole media area.
People are searching for their headlines, and speaking of that, I clicked through the news today on news.com.au, and I came across an article that was called 10 Shocking Golden Globe Moments, and one of them was the headline, Jodie Foster stumbles out of the closet. Previously closeted gay actress Foster received the Cecil B. DeMille, and then it just goes into...
She's been out of the closet for how many years?
Since the Stone Age, as quoted by Jodie. So I do hope that, talking about these issues becomes a call to action in itself, in that reportage needs to be more responsible, it needs to be more inclusive and more culturally on point, and the reporting of same-sex unions, marriages, perhaps, some publications can be forgiven for, struggling how to describe it because we're not yet able to marry in this country. But
sure.
I think it's highlighted this week that we still have a way to go.
I mean, is ageism itself homophobic? I mean, of course not. But are heterosexual couples subjected to the same sort of ageist of headlines?
The Clooney headlines is the one that you've described. We didn't see that with Clooney. Clooney marries lawyer.
Yes. Well, they did. They were a bit sexist, some of those stories, because they really downplayed her professional background. But I was having a look at some of the Fairfax stolen engagement stories. Sofia Vergara and Joe Manganiello engaged. Jerry Halliwell engaged to Formula One team boss Christian Horner. Heiress Nikki Hilton is engaged to a Rothschild, according to Sister Paris. Mila Kunis engaged to Ashton Kutcher. In each case, they've honoured both partners by naming them in the headline.
Indeed, indeed. Well, Steve, thank you for joining us today. I think you've drawn a sharper focus on some of the editorial things that we're facing in the community, and I hope that journos yourself will help, make these guys a bit more honest in the way that they're reporting. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Serena. Here's to a fairer 2015.
Oh, game on. Thanks, Steve.